thousands of people. How were they able to do it? The reason is because they were getting 80% of their arms from Clinton. And as the atrocities increased, the arms flow increased. In fact, in one single year, 1997, Clinton sent more arms to Turkey than the entire Cold War period combined up until the counterinsurgency. That was not reported in the West. You do not report your own crimes. That's critical. And right in the midst of all of this, how can we tolerate a couple of thousand people being killed in Kosovo, mixed guerrillas and, In fact, the 50th anniversary of NATO took place right in the middle of this.
In the middle of the moment.
And there were lamentations about what's going on right across NATO's border. Not a word about the much worse things going on inside NATO's border, thanks to the massive flow of arms from the United States. And that's only one case. Comparable things were going on all over, with the U.S. and Britain supporting them. Much worse. But this, you had to focus on this. That was the topic for the herd of independent minds, played a crucial role in their self-image because they had been going through a period of praising themselves for their magnificence in their normative revolution and the noble phase and so on and so forth. So it was a godsend. And therefore you couldn't ask any questions about it. Incidentally, the same happened in the earlier phase of the Balkan Wars. So they're awful and so on and so forth. However, but if you look at the coverage, for example, there was one famous incident which just completely reshaped Western opinion. That was the photograph of the thin man in the behind the barbed wire.
Fraudulent photograph.
Well, you remember the thin man behind the barbed wire. So that was Auschwitz, and we can't have Auschwitz again. So everyone, the intellectuals went crazy. French were posturing on television and the usual antics. Well, it was investigated and carefully investigated. In fact, it was investigated by the leading Western specialist on the topic, Philip Knightley. He's a highly respected media analyst, and his specialty is photojournalism. He's probably the most famous Western and most respected Western analyst of this. He did a detailed analysis of it, and he determined that it was probably the reporters who were behind the barbed wire, and the place was ugly, but it was a refugee camp. People could leave if they wanted. Right near the thin man, there was a fat man, and so on. Well, there was one tiny newspaper in England, probably 3 people, called LM, which ran a critique of this. The British, who haven't the slightest concept of freedom of speech, that is total fraud, a major corporation, ITN, big media corporation, had publicized these. So the corporation sued the tiny newspaper for libel. Well, British libel laws are absolutely atrocious. The person who's accused has to prove that what he's reporting was done with malice. You can't prove that. So, and in fact, when you have a huge corporation with batteries of lawyers and so on, carrying out a suit against 3 people in an office who probably don't have pocket money, it's obvious what's going to happen, especially under these grotesque libel laws. So yes, they were able to prove, the little newspaper couldn't prove that it was done with malice, put out of business. There was just euphoria in the left liberal British press. After they put the newspaper out of business under this utterly grotesque legal case in British laws, the left liberal newspapers, like The Guardian, and were just in a state of euphoria about this wonderful achievement. They had managed to destroy a tiny newspaper because it questioned some image that they had presented, and they were very proud of themselves for, which was probably misunderstood or misinterpreted. Well, Philip Knightley wrote a very harsh critique of the British media for behaving in this way and tried to teach them an elementary lesson about freedom of speech. He also added that probably the photograph was misinterpreted. Couldn't get it published. That's when Kosovo came along, it's the same thing. That you cannot tell the truth about it. In fact, I've gone through a ton of reporting on this. Almost invariably, they invert the chronology.